Chapter 7. Ahmad had just fallen asleep when he heard knocks on the door of his hut. It was past 9 p.m. and he woke up, worried, for the knock was odd at that time of the night. He slowly got up from bed and walked to the door. He hesitated, then opened it, and to his utter surprise, Aisha and Qasim were standing there outside the hut. He recalled that Qasim had shown him the hut when he moved in. Ahmad was speechless for a moment, then asked them to come inside. Qasim declined. Aisha stepped inside, but before the door was shut, she asked Qasim to wait for her because he would escort her back to the camp. After Qasim had asked Aisha to follow him, they had walked to the annexed section of the camp where Ahmad's hut was located. Qasim knew the exact location of the hut because he had taken Ahmad there. Qasim took a position a few yards away from the hut and waited while Aisha visited with the man he thought was her brother. Ahmad's visage was expressive of total disbelief that he was alone with Aisha in, of all places, a private hut assigned to him by the murderous ZOBBO organization that had violently abducted Aisha. He stammered through welcoming her and asked what had made her to visit with him at that time of the night. How was she able to pass through the gauntlet of security to get to him? But most of all, how she was able to locate his hut. He thought the fighter who had accompanied her had something to do with that, but he was curious about how the fighter got to know that they were associates. "Remember, I told you I had a lot to tell you," said Aisha. "By the way, were you at the common dining area several days ago? I saw the back of someone that looked like you." Ahmad told her it was him. "I saw you too," he told her. "And who was that man I saw you with?" he asked her. Aisha's eyes welled up at the question, and she began to sob. Ahmad became confused at her reaction, wondering what nerve he had struck in her. Then Aisha opened up on her ordeal from the moment of her capture to the trek through the forest to the camp, to the forced marriage to Omar, the man Ahmad had seen her with, to the rapes and other abuse she endured from him. She cried loudly at the end of her tale of suffering as she relived the awful things that had happened to her, many of which she had committed to the recesses of her memory, never to think or talk about them until now, because Ahmad had asked a question which required wading through that mental muck. Ahmad now understood the origin of the compromising situation she had found Aisha in. He did not tell her about his strongly negative reaction to it, but now, after listening to her story, he was full of sympathy for her and red-hot anger for Omar. "I will kill him," he vowed. "Please don't get involved in that," she pleaded. "He must die for what he has done to you." Please don't do it," said Aisha. "You told me you came here to rescue me. Don't let his issues derail the reason why you came here." "I will accomplish what I came here for, and I will still get him," insisted Omar. "By the way, the man who escorted you here was the same man who brought me to this hut, who introduced me to the hut. Do you know him well?" "I don't really know him well, but he's a good man. I treated him for battle wounds, and we became friends." "That's very good," said Ahmad. "He could make my plans to get you out of here easier. He does not know I am your fiancé. I told him you are my brother to get his sympathy to escort me here. So bear that in mind when you do talk to him," said Aisha. "I am curious about this man you were forced to marry. How were you able to escape from him to come here?" Ahmad asked. "Well, he left for an operation somewhere. When he goes away for such matters, he's often gone for a week, sometimes 2 weeks. He left in the morning." It was like old times again. Aisha did not want to leave, but she had to, because Qasim couldn't afford to be gone for too long from his colleagues, lest suspicions arise over his absence from his duty post for an extended period of time. Sharif was known to infiltrate the movement with spies who were personally loyal to him, since a challenge to his authority years ago had resulted in a bloody schism which he brutally suppressed. The longer Aisha stayed in the hut with Ahmad, the higher the anxiety level for Qasim, who heaved a sigh of relief when Aisha emerged from the hut after being inside for about an hour. "You were there for too long," he complained. "I'm so sorry," said Aisha. "Come on, we have to hurry back to the camp," Qasim said as he took off, walking brisk, long strides with his long legs that Aisha had to trot at times to keep up with him. Aisha got back home within 20 minutes of leaving Ahmad's hut. She was alone in the hut, but she felt fine because her tormentor was away, and she had just visited with her fiancé. It was a nice visit, and she basked in the accompanying exhilaration. For the first time since the loss of her freedom, she was happy again. Short-lived though it would be when Omar returned. But she enjoyed the moment as long as she could. She made herself a dinner of millet and soup, ate her fill, and went to bed, relieved that she would not be subjected to another night of rape. As she slept, Omar, at that very moment, was walking his suicide bombers to the location of an attack, a large government building picked for the hit in retaliation for airstrikes on ZOBBO's camp. Leading up to the attack, Omar had been summoned to an emergency meeting of mid-level and senior commanders in Sharif's bunker, and the decision had been taken to carry out the attack. The suicide bombers were selected from a depleting pool of young men and women. ZOBBO had launched these attacks lately in a bloody struggle which had extended to a wide swath of government-controlled territory. The ZOBBO strategy was to go after soft targets such as mosques, churches, markets, and major buildings. Omar exhorted the suicide bombers and told them they were doing it to hit back at infidels and corrupt political leaders. But as he gave his pep talk to people who would take down a major building and cause casualties in the attack, his own surreptitious murder was being contemplated upon by a man whose fiancée he had violated, and that man was Ahmad. Omar's sin of rape, for that was how Ahmad characterized what he had done to his sweetheart, would not go unpunished. Ahmad continually vouched aloud to himself after Aisha had left to return home. He could forgive everything else Aisha had been put through, but on this crime of rape, he would make Omar pay a price with his life at a place and time of his choosing, Ahmad vowed. His training was scheduled to start the next day. As the first day of this training would last for several hours, there was need for a restful night. But the just concluded meeting with Aisha had made his spirits to soar such that, in spite of the Omar provocation, he was unable to sleep. When roosters crowed, signaling the arrival of the new dawn the next morning, he still had sleep in his eyes. Ahmad and 20 other recruits constituted the training batch that had gathered at a ZOBBO training facility in another section of the huge forest about a mile away from the camp. Ahmad was shocked when he observed that the training instructors were light-skinned and had the physical attributes of North African Arabs, specifically from the Maghreb region of northwestern Africa. The doctrinal training he received in his military days included topics about the collaboration of militant groups in North Africa and the Middle East and the homegrown ZOBBO organization, and how they had all merged ideologies to focus on a common goal of overthrowing the established political order for a universal theocratic state. Ahmad assessed the trainers to be military men by the way they carried themselves and how they conducted the training. The training lasted for 7 days, during which Ahmad went through familiar drills, weapons handling, and tactical guerrilla warfare. ZOBBO's mix of politics and socio-economic goals for its future theocratic state were also taught to the recruits. Ahmad observed many firebrands among his fellow recruits who genuinely believed in the cause of ZOBBO and were totally committed to die defending that cause. He could now understand why the ZOBBO organization had become a tough nut to crack for the authorities over several years of bloody conflict that had killed thousands and destroyed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property. At the passing out parade, Ahmad and his colleagues were issued certificates and told to be on standby for their first action, which could occur at any time. Ahmad went home to await his orders. Before those orders came, he repeatedly practiced his Aisha extraction strategy in his head. Action by Ahmad for the ZOBBO organization against the state would definitely be a treasonous act for which he could be punished accordingly if captured in battle. He couldn't guarantee that a defense of being a fake fighter as a stratagem in the rescue of an abducted woman would be accepted as a valid defense during trial. Ahmad wanted to act on his plan before any ZOBBO call-up and deployment for action. But he first needed to see Aisha to learn whether Omar was back, and if he was, what his schedule would be in the coming week. The only way to see Aisha was to feign illness so he could visit the clinic. But he first had to communicate his ill health to Audu, who would issue a pass for admission to be treated at the clinic. A call-up for action against a military post was issued 1 week after Ahmad's training, and his unit was assigned the task. The unit practiced assault tactics and reviewed maps and the tactical plan. On the eve of the operation, Ahmad approached Audu and asked for a medical pass to visit the clinic for treatment of malaria and typhoid fever. He purposely shivered as he made his request, as shivering was one of the symptoms of malaria disease. Audu granted the request. The next stage of Ahmad's plan was to visit the clinic to inform Aisha to meet him in his hut at night. Aisha would come to him the same way she had come the last time, aided by Qasim, he thought. But her being able to do this would hinge on Omar's absence from home, and Qasim agreeing to accompany her. If everything worked out and Qasim escorted Aisha, he would persuade Qasim to enter the hut to receive a gift. Ahmad would use his military training to knock Qasim down, seize his weapon, shoot Qasim with it, and melt into the night with Aisha. After receiving the clinic medical pass, Ahmad returned to his hut to eat a lunch of roasted maize and coconut. He left shortly thereafter for the clinic. At the clinic, Ahmad learned that Aisha was absent from work, and news had filtered into her colleagues about her arrest the previous night by the ZOBBO Morals and Ethics Unit. Ahmad had showed up as a patient in need of care, hoping he would be attended to by Aisha. He checked in with a nurse and had overheard the conversation in hushed tones among the nurses about Aisha's arrest. Ahmad listened attentively and learned that a guard named Qasim had also been arrested, and that Qasim and Aisha were charged with adultery. Ahmad was floored by what he heard. He did not know what to make of it, as it began to dawn on him that his great rescue mission was now on the verge of a colossal collapse. His confusion was made worse by Aisha's alleged adultery with Qasim. Was that even true? Where would any man lure Aisha into that, knowing that Aisha was the wife, in quotes, of a ZOBBO commander? Such a man would be signing his own death warrant. Ahmad believed that the charge was false, but if it were, why was it leveled against her? Ahmad thought something big must be going on, and he had better try to get a handle of it very quickly. He needed time to process all of the information and do some investigation of his own, and the clinic was not the best place to do that. He spent a few minutes in the patient waiting area, then got up and approached the nurse to obtain an excuse to leave temporarily. He told her he had to deal with an emergency matter at home and would be back later for his treatment. Ahmad left to return home, thinking the worse for Aisha and the nature of the calamity that had befallen her. The latest catastrophe to hit Aisha, and analogous to her abduction months ago, had actually started a couple of days after her night visit with Ahmad. One of Qasim's colleagues, named Malik, who was also on duty at the gate on that night of Aisha's visit with Ahmad, had reported Qasim and Aisha to the Morals and Ethics Unit for committing adultery. When Qasim had been away with Aisha for that inordinate amount of time, he concluded, Malik did, that they had arranged for Qasim to have carnal knowledge of Aisha. Malik knew Aisha to be Omar's wife because he had seen them together in a number of settings within the camp, at the clinic, the dining area, and during special speeches by Sheriff. Malik judged Qasim and Aisha's behavior a sin, which had to be reported. Malik had made his oral report to the appropriate authorities, and an order was given for the arrests of Aisha and Qasim. Aisha was held in a hut cell at the northern end of the camp and had been there for a few days before Ahmad's clinic visit. Investigations had been opened into the charges. Omar had returned a few days after Aisha's arrest to learn of her situation. Enraged, he took two accomplices with him to Qasim's cell. where they rained blows on him for several minutes until he lost consciousness. Qasim denied any carnal knowledge of Aisha during his initial interrogation. To the question of what he was doing with Aisha in the middle of the night at an unusual location, he lied to protect Ahmad, who he continued to believe was Aisha's brother. Aisha was a platonic friend, he told his interrogators, and he had only provided her with security so she could harvest herbs from the bushes outside the camp for use in treating an ailment. As Qasim did not know whether the visit to Ahmad had been authorized by Aisha's husband, he could not implicate her with visiting another man, even if that man was Aisha's claimed brother, in case it was later found not to be true. But Aisha's answer to the same question of why she was out late with Qasim had been different. She stated that she had visited with her brother and that Qasim had provided her with security along the way. Aisha's interrogation had taken place on the eve of Ahmad's clinic visit. The discrepancies in the answers provided by Qasim and Aisha to the same question were the basis for the order for Ahmad's arrest to explain his role in the entire affair. A mentally drained Ahmad had returned from the clinic and was sitting on his bed when he heard loud knocks on his door. He asked who it was in a loud voice without a response from the door knocker. He asked again and again, and there was silence still. In view of what he had heard about Aisha at the clinic, he feared for the worst. He was contemplating what to do when the wooden door was kicked down and several fighters rushed in. They beat and bloodied him before handcuffing and taking him out. "What is my offense?" he asked as he was grabbed by his arms and shoulders and dragged outside. "I haven't done anything wrong," he kept protesting. Ahmad was detained in a dirty hot cell infested with mosquitoes. The camp was located in what seemed like a mosquito colony. But Ahmad's cell harbored way more than its fair share of the blood-sucking disease vectors, which annoyingly buzzed his ears. The matter was reported to Sheriff, who ordered an investigation and a trial. Qasim and Aisha faced the death penalty if convicted. Ahmad's arrest had been ordered because of the inconsistencies in the testimony of Aisha and Qasim. The investigators knew that Aisha was an involuntary resident of the camp, a contrast with Ahmad, who had come in voluntarily as a converted member of ZOBBO. As Ahmad sat in his cell, he worried about his cover being blown as a fake ZOBBO member, which would happen if a connection was established between him and Aisha. He did not know whether Aisha had been interrogated, and he wondered about what had led to his arrest. What the next move of those who arrested him would be scared him to death. They could repeat the vicious beating they had given him, or worse still, shoot him. He thought his fate had been sealed and that the end had come. He would miss his brother, and he was sad about it. His parents were both deceased, and he would gladly see them on the other side. He had taken the actions he took for love, and he did not regret any of them. He was instead disappointed that he could not accomplish the mission. After accepting the terrible fate he believed awaited him, Ahmad infused his mind and soul with military psychology. This enabled him to cast away the fear of death. He now waited for his execution. When several fighters approached his cell, Several days later, and he had seen them through his cell window, he thought his execution was imminent. The heavy padlock to the cell was unlocked, and he was ordered to step out. He was grabbed by the collar and pushed along a footpath towards a parked pickup truck. His hands and feet were quickly bound before he was picked up and heaved into the truck. He landed on the bed with a thud and winced in pain. The vehicle appeared to have sat under the blazing sun for several hours, and the trapped heat in the metal flooring of the vehicle scalded exposed areas of his skin as he lay there, unable to adjust his position because his hands and feet were fettered. The vehicle took off on the unpaved road along gullies and puddles of rancid rainwater. The driver deliberately sped and meandered abruptly around the gullies in the road. And as he did this, Ahmad was rolled from one end of the bed of the vehicle to the other, like a log of wood. They arrived at a green painted bungalow 10 minutes later. ZOBBO's court was located in the green painted building. Sheriff held court here, along with several religious leaders of ZOBBO. They dispensed harsh judgments in a strict interpretation of their brand of Islam. Ahmad was unloaded from the vehicle and brought into the building. He had been indicted for being a mole, but he had not yet been told about the charge. The investigation had concluded that Ahmad had joined ZOBBO to effect a rescue of Aisha from the ZOBBO camp, and that his professed love for ZOBBO and its ideology, which was his purported impetus for joining, was all a ruse. He would be shot if found guilty of the charge. Ahmad was detained under heavy guard in a holding cell. He knew his situation was hopeless, but he had conquered fear at this point. He did not want to die, but he was also realistic about his predicament and the viciousness of the ZOBBO organization. He actually felt for Aisha and what she was going through, wherever she was being held. He still loved her and wished that she would be released and forever set free from the camp, though the realities of the current situation made his wish seem like a pipe dream. Aisha was detained in the women's section of the prison complex, which consisted of a bunch of huts sectioned off from the rest of the camp and fenced with barbed wire. She was not maltreated and physically abused like Ahmad had been subjected to, presumably because she was female. Omar had slapped her when he visited with her in jail, but he was restrained from further assaulting her by prison guards. As a prisoner, she was considered to be in the custody of Sheriff until her trial. Omar had to respect this process, and this saved Aisha from grave physical harm from Omar, who was furious at her. Aisha's days were spent in solitary confinement. She was depressed and ate very little. She had no idea about what Ahmad's circumstances were, but she also had a hunch about terrible things probably happening to him, perhaps worse than she was going through. She worried about him and often cried for him. His true love for her had driven him to embark on the dangerous mission. It now appeared that Ahmad was about to be consumed by the merciless ZOBBO beast, and she felt awful for him. She continually prayed for him. He did not have to abandon his life of luxury to embark on the dangerous journey to extract her from the clutches of ZOBBO, but he had done it because of his love and affection for her. End of chapter 7.